So, our mission today for this Album Quest deep dive is to break down one of these pivotal battlegrounds. Round 1, Group 195.
Ah, specific group. Okay.
Yeah, and for you, the listener, the goal is to get a really structured understanding of the criteria he used when he had to force these 4 very different pieces of music into a ranking.
And Group 195 really shows that randomness, doesn't it? The 4 contenders are just all over the place.
Totally, who've we got?
Okay, first up, The Best of 25 Years, revisited by Alison Moyet. That's a deep catalog compilation.
Okay. Artist best of.
Then, Unorthodox Jukebox by Bruno Mars. A tight, modern studio album. Very different feel.
Right. Studio album versus compilation.
Third, the absolute monument that is the Grease soundtrack.
Yeah.
Various artists, obviously. Musical theater, pure nostalgia bomb.
Wow. Okay. Soundtrack inclusion. Interesting.
And finally, High Times. Singles, 1992-2006 by Jamiroquai. Another collection, but this time a singles collection, representing that specific acid jazz funk sound.
Good grief. An absolute mashup. Across genres, decades, formats, a compilation, a studio album, a soundtrack, and a singles collection.
Yep.
So, we're going to really unpack the arguments, the subtle criteria he must have used to compare, say, the Grease soundtrack to a Jamiroquai singles collection, and look at the personal history, his history, that shaped that final ranking.
Sounds good. Let's start with the winners then, the ones that made it through.
Let's do it. Let's unpack this and start with the albums that earned their passage to round 2. Okay, kicking off with the winner. The album that took the coveted first-place spot in Group 195, Alison Moyet's The Best of 25 Years Revisited. Reading the notes, the author's praise for this one is, well, immediate, almost reverential, actually.
Yeah, he's clearly got a lot of time for this collection.
So what was the core argument? Why did this one come out on top against such different competition?
The core argument really boils down to intentionality, what Unorthodox calls the power of curation.
Curation.
See, lots of greatest hits albums are just, put together by the record label. They follow chart success, maybe throw in a new track. This one's different.
How so?
These songs were explicitly handpicked by Alison Moyet herself, spanning a quarter century of her career.
Okay. The artist's own choices.
Exactly. And for the author, that artist endorsement, her deciding how to define her own legacy through these tracks, it just lends this undeniable weight to the choices. Something a standard label-driven compilation just can't match.
But that distinction feels really important in a ranking system like this. It shifts it from being just like market data, these were the hits, to being an actual artist statement.
Totally. She's intentionally crafted the listening experience, choosing tracks, presumably based on artistic merit, what she feels represents her best, not just what sold the most.
And reading the notes, there was a kind of surprising personal connection for the author in that curation too, wasn't there?
Absolutely. He felt really validated by it. He notes he was pleased to see that Moyet basically chose the ones I would have too.
That's brilliant.
It is. That alignment of taste, it suggests this deep shared understanding between the artist and, well, the Quest author about what her best work actually is. It removes any quibbles about, oh, she left off this track, and builds immediate trust in the quality control.
Okay, so the curation is key. Let's dig into the album itself, the structure. It flows chronologically, which is pretty standard for a best of, but how does it manage to set the tone so effectively right at the start?
Yeah, the opening is crucial, isn't it? And he highlights that she kicks off with 4 belters from her smash debut, ALF.
Belters. Love that description.
And we're not just talking 4 random hits. He names them. Love, Resurrection, All Cried Out, Invisible, and Where Heights Sleep.
Okay, classics.
Yeah, but they're also remarkably diverse, even just those 4. You go from up-tempo, sort of new wave pop, to these big, soaring ballads. And these tracks from the mid-'80s, they really established her voice as this distinctive force, right at that intersection of, like, electronic pop and classic soul.
And it's fascinating how that initial burst of quality, it sets a really high bar. The rest of the compilation has to live up to that, does it? How does the quality hold up as you move past that massive debut era?
It really does hold up. He calls it an endless stream of continuing quality, which is high praise for a 25-year span.
Wow. Any specific later tracks he mentions?
He specifically points out tracks like the soulful depth of Hoodoo and the enduring power of Weak in the Presence of Beauty. That track was so significant to him, actually, that the whole chapter in his notes is titled after it.
No way. Okay, that's commitment.
Yeah. So the fact that the material keeps that emotional and technical standard across decades, that's what secures its place above the competition. It's consistent, sustained excellence.
We absolutely have to talk about her voice, though. If an album is showcasing a career, The voice itself is the anchor. Wow.
That's the ultimate point, really. The synthesizing element.
Yeah.
Unorthodox describes Moyet's voice as wonderful, resonant, and slightly husky.
Good description.
And that specific rich sound, that timbre, it just carries the whole collection. Because think about it, over 25 years, technology changes, production trends change, musical styles evolve drastically.
Right.
But her voice, that powerful, soulful, maybe slightly world-weary instrument that's the constant. It anchors those early electronic tracks, and it gives real gravitas to the later, maybe more subdued stuff.
Yeah.
That unwavering vocal excellence over such a long period, that's what clinched the #1 spot, according to his criteria.
Okay, a masterfully curated statement of consistent quality, carried by an incredible voice. Makes sense. Now let's shift to the runner-up, the album that apparently gave Moyet the toughest fight, Bruno Mars's Unorthodox Jukebox.
Right. Album #2 in the group.
The author introduces this one with a bit of initial skepticism, almost intentional humor.
He does. He opens with that joke about the name Bruno Mars, making him sound more like a dog from outer space.
Right, I remember reading that.
It sets up this immediate funny contrast, this stage name suggesting something maybe alien or outlandish versus the reality, which is an incredibly grounded, Grammy-winning soul singer from Hawaii, rooted in traditional R&B Motown structures.
That contradiction seems pretty central to the album's appeal, doesn't it? The delivery is modern, slick, almost hyper-polished pop in places, but the musical language underneath feels timeless.
Exactly. He nails it by saying Mars brings a fresh pop perspective on the traditional Motown style. It's not just copying, it's this intelligent, really energizing blend. The album delivers these super catchy soul pop tracks that somehow manage to sound both vintage and completely current at the same time.
That's a neat trick.
It is, and that ability to blend respect for tradition with, hitting the contemporary commercial sweet spot. That's a major factor in why it ranks so high.
What made the author pick this specific album for the quest in the first place? It was his second studio album, right? Not a compilation like Moyet's.
Yeah, good question. The entry point was apparently very specific. It was the lead single, Locked Out of Heaven.
Okay. Big hit.
Huge hit. And Unorthodox notes that track was the catalyst, the song that inspired me to try out this whole album and actually include it in the quest.
So one song drew him in.
Seems so. That track, with its sort of police-esque energy mixed with that modern pop rhythm, it was compelling enough to make him want to investigate the whole album properly. The spark was immediate, and then the deeper listen confirmed the quality was there throughout.
Let's talk production. The source material really emphasizes that the material here is tight, and that a lot of work has obviously gone into refining the chosen tracks. This is where that focused studio album quality goes head-to-head with Moyet's curated history. What does tight production mean here?
Tightness here seems to mean like zero fat, no filler, meticulous arrangements. When he says it's tight, he means every instrument, every vocal layer, every beat feels perfectly placed to maximize impact.
Precision.
No loose edges, no rambling instrumental bits. It's punchy, precise, designed for immediate grab-you-ness, but still with musical complexity underneath. Think of tracks like Gorilla or Treasure. That dedication to craft really shines through.
And that polish, that professional rigor, gives it a big edge over, say, maybe less cohesive collections.
Absolutely. He gives it significant weight in the comparison.
Now, the author felt he had to address one potential criticism, didn't he? That the album is maybe a bit too sex-obsessed throughout.
He did, yeah. And this is where his personal criteria really come through quite strongly.
How does he handle it?
He basically dismisses the critique outright.
Yeah.
By providing context, he just rattles off this list of other artists, Lady Gaga, Madonna, George Michael, Whitesnake, AC/DC, all known for heavily sexualized themes.
Okay, covering a few bases there.
Right. And then he humorously adds himself to the list.
He does.
Yeah. The point he's making is kind of philosophical. The subject matter itself isn't a valid reason to criticize, not if the music is executed at a high level.
Yeah.
Artistry trumps any perceived thematic controversy, essentially.
That feels like an important declaration of independence for his quest. He's saying, look, I'm here to judge the music, the sound, the production, the performance, not the lyrical morality police.
Exactly. Judge the art, not the theme necessarily.
And the music itself in his final judgment.
Impeccable, apparently. And enough to secure that runner-up spot. The consensus from him was strong. He couldn't find a single bad track. The energy, the production, the pure infectious quality. It meant it was only, in his words, bettered by Moyet in this group.
So it lost to Moyet's decades of perfectly curated excellence,
Hmm.
but it decisively beat the other two based on its single focused moment of high-energy creativity.
That sums it up perfectly.
Okay, so Moyet wins on consistent, artist-validated quality over time. Mars wins on immediate, highly polished, energetic studio focus. Two very different standards, both achieving success. Now, we have to move to the two contenders that, while he seemed to thoroughly enjoy them, failed to progress.
Yeah, the albums that finished third and fourth. And analyzing why they failed is just as important, I think. It tells us a lot about the Quest's implicit rules.
Yeah, looking at the bottom two albums is critical because it forces us to confront the structural limitations, maybe, that prevents certain types of albums, specifically soundtracks and maybe retrospective singles collections, from competing successfully against really intentional single artist works in this particular Quest, at least in this group.
Okay, let's start with the cultural behemoth then. The Grease soundtrack, it landed in third place. This album has immense cultural weight. It's pure nostalgia. 1978 movie set in the 50s. That whole romance between, as he puts it, the uber-cool Danny and the ultra-saccharine Sandy. The nostalgia factor is absolutely huge here. And the author totally acknowledges that. He details the setting, the enduring story appeal. But a soundtrack, by its very nature, is a composite work. It serves the film first, the narrative master.
Right. It's an artifact of the movie, not necessarily designed as a standalone, cohesive musical journey in the same way a studio album or even Moyet's curated best of is.
Exactly. That's its primary function.
Yet its impact is just undeniable, which the author captures with this idea of the karaoke effect.
Ah, yes, the karaoke effect. That's its greatest strength, probably. But also maybe its fatal flaw in the context of this Quest.
How so?
Unorthodox notes that every time he plays it, it threatens to break out into an all-out karaoke fest. You know, tracks like You're the One That I Want, Summer Nights, Grease Lightning.
Yeah.
They're just instant communal sing-alongs.
Absolutely. Everyone knows them.
He even confesses his own personal urge to switch on the karaoke machine and pretend I know the words to We Go Together. Which, let's be honest, who hasn't felt that?
Guilty as charged. That sense of shared, infectious joy is massive. But when we look at the album's actual musical makeup, we find that really strange, unique blend of artists.
And this is the critical structural weakness, according to the notes. You've got established, professional singers like Frankie Avalon, Sean Nana, Frankie Vallow, mixed right alongside the actual cast members, notably John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John.
Which creates a kind of uneven sound profile.
Definitely. And the author doesn't really mince words about the difference in vocal talent, though he tries to be polite. He notes that John Travolta is no singer, adding he means that in the nicest way.
A gentle critique.
It's a crucial observation, though. Travolta's performance works brilliantly in the film, for the character, but purely on vocal quality. It can't match the sustained technical excellence of Alison Moyet or the polished studio perfection of Bruno Mars. That unevenness is just baked into the soundtrack format.
And there are other disruptions too, right, stylistically.
Yeah, the album features some serious stylistic whiplash. He specifically mentions the 6-track Sha Na Na takeover in the middle. Pure 50s doo-wop rock and roll.
Right. Necessary for the film's setting, but maybe jarring on just an audio listen.
Exactly. It disrupts the flow and cohesion that seem to be valued highly in this quality-focused Quest.
So, despite the massive fun factor, the cultural significance, the sheer number of absolute bangers on there, the internal inconsistencies meant it couldn't get past third place.
Precisely. The ranking, it seems, came down to consistent musical quality over sheer enjoyability or nostalgia. He ranked it below Moyet's consistent vocal performance and curated excellence, and below the refreshingly soulful pop of Bruno Mars. Grease is maybe the ultimate example of an album winning on nostalgia and fun, but losing on a rigorous track-by-track technical and structural assessment.
Okay, makes sense within his framework. Now, moving to the fourth place contender, Jamiroquai's High Times. Singles, 1992-2006. Another collection, like Moyet's, but this one evokes a very different history for the author. A history of resistance, it sounds like, and then delayed appreciation.
This is a really fascinating entry, because the struggle here seems entirely personal and historical for Unorthodox. He even notes the initial difficulty with the name itself, finding Jamiroquai almost as tough to say as it is to spell.
I can relate.
But the real barrier, the deep one, was rooted in his teenage identity.
Right. He describes himself as a metal-obsessed teenager who wanted to rebel from the mainstream charts.
Exactly. And Jamiroquai's music, that acid jazz funk sound, with heady electronic and dance elements, it was considered dangerously electronic and dancey.
The enemy.
Pretty much. For a teenager whose whole identity was built on rejecting the mainstream pop charts, this music was antithetical. It was everything the metal sound he valued wasn't.
So that prejudice meant he just couldn't connect with it back then.
For years, yeah. He says he only grudgingly quite liked the tracks that were just unavoidable, like Cosmic Girl and Virtual Insanity. But they never really blew me away, as he puts it.
That's a powerful handicap for an album to overcome in this quest. How do you judge something objectively when your own internal history is screaming, no?
What started to change his mind? What was the slow conversion?
It sounds like it was a gradual process, or maybe 2 decades, but there was a definitive turning point just before the millennium, the release of Canned Heat.
Ah, okay. Another huge track.
Yeah, he describes that one as excellent, a song he still admires. That seems to be the psychological shift. The moment the music itself finally broke through the genre prejudices of his youth, it was proof that his tastes could and did evolve.
So fast forward 2 decades. When he revisits High Times for the Quest, he's bringing a different perspective.
A completely different one. He says he now has a much more balanced appreciation. He sees the body of work not as some electronic threat, but as sophisticated. He calls it a bit different. Actually, it's a lot different, but in a good way. Okay, so he's overcome the personal bias. He now appreciates the blend of funk, acid jazz, dance, recognizes the musicianship, JK's unique style. But despite this newfound adult appreciation, the singles collection still landed in 4th, dead last in the group.
Yeah, still 4th.
Why? If he admits it's excellent now, why did it fall below Grease, which he identified as having significant structural flaws?
It really speaks to the rigorous comparison demanded by this album quest format, doesn't it? While Jamiroquai clearly overcame the hurdle of his personal prejudice as a singles collection, maybe it lacked the unifying narrative thread of a studio album like Unorthodox Jukebox. And perhaps the curation, while good, wasn't seen as artist-driven in the same powerful, definitive way as Alison Moyet's selection was presented. He doesn't explicitly state why it's below Grease, but reading between the lines.
So High Times is a great compilation, he now admits that. But in this specific head-to-head comparison, it just got edged out by the others.
Seems like it. He even acknowledges it was a really good group of albums, High Times indeed, confirming its quality. But it just wasn't enough to secure progression against these particular competitors, judged by his specific criteria at that moment.
Right, so we've gone through the intense listening session for Group 195. We've dissected the merits of Moyet's vocal pop, Mars's focused soul pop, the musical theater phenomenon of Grease, and Jamiroquai's acid jazz funk. Now, let's synthesize. Let's analyze the underlying criteria that Unorthodox must have been using here.
Exactly. This is where we move beyond just listing favorites and try to figure out the actual philosophy of his ranking system, at least for this group. We can start to see a clear hierarchy of values emerging, I think, the things that guided this specific outcome. It reveals his implicit meta-criteria for the whole album quest.
Okay, let's try and map out that hierarchy. Alison Moyet's The Best of 25 Years Revisited came out on top. What specific combination of factors made her work the winner, even against something as generationally iconic as Grease?
The victory seems to hinge on that combination of intentionality and scope. Moyet delivered 25 years of consistent, high-level quality. Crucially, curated and endorsed by the artist herself. So in the author's world, it looks like intentional artist curation over time ranks highest.
Okay, that makes sense.
It signifies that the artist, looking back, has selected the absolute peak moments, creating an album where, ideally, filler is impossible, and her powerful, consistent voice just acts as the perfect unifying thread across all those evolving styles and decades.
Got it. And then Bruno Mars secured 2nd place. His success seems to affirm the value of something different. Focused, contemporary excellence.
Yeah, Mars won based on the criteria of, let's say, focused studio quality and immediate impact. Unorthodox Jukebox is super polished, it's tight, it's an energized statement from a single moment in time. The author clearly prioritizes that high production quality and consistent energy.
Which makes a strong, concise studio album like that superior to, say, the more uneven production you might get in a sprawling soundtrack.
Exactly. And maybe the fact that Locked Out of Heaven from this album was the initial catalyst for the whole album quest gave it a bit of an emotional edge, too. It transcended just being a quality assessment, maybe. A little personal connection there.
Interesting point. But this raises an immediate question, doesn't it? Doesn't the sheer cultural weight, the universal enjoyability of Grease count for more than a tight studio album for many people?
For many people, absolutely.
Okay.
But the quest criteria, as applied here by Unorthodox, suggests the answer is definitively no. The Grease soundtrack got downgraded because it's fundamentally a composite. It excels at cultural nostalgia and communal fun. Massively so.
But those qualities weren't enough.
Weren't enough when judged against the consistent technical excellence of the top two, it seems. The structural flaws he noted, uneven vocal performances, stylistic shifts dictated by the movie's needs they broke, the consistency required to progress in this quest. Cultural weight secured third place, but no higher.
Okay. And Jamiroquai, the last place finisher, penalized by that unique combo of format and personal history.
Yeah, Jamiroquai's High Times collection failed on criteria from two angles here. Firstly, while he appreciates it now, it had to overcome that decades-long personal bias and initial resistance. That's a tough starting point.
Sure.
And secondly, as a singles collection that wasn't explicitly framed as artist-curated, or at least not weighted as highly as Moyet's personal selection was, it seems to land lowest in his hierarchy of compilation value for this group. It was great music, he concedes that now, but maybe the weakest format in this particular group when judged against the focused studio work and the heavily weighted artist-curated best of.
So it sounds like the hierarchy for Group 195 shook out something like this. Top tier is artist-endorsed career peaks, followed very closely by impeccable, focused studio work. Then comes cultural artifacts with structural flaws. And finally, perhaps less intentionally curated singles collections, especially those with historical baggage for the listener.
That feels like a really precise summation of how Group 195 played out, based on his notes. The analysis makes it clear that the winner in his album quest isn't just the album with the most hits, or the most fun factor. It's the one that demonstrates the highest level of artistic intention and flawless consistency within its chosen format.
Okay, let's make it official then. Let's confirm the Group 195 final rankings as determined by Greenstocks in his quest.
All right, the results are set. The two albums demonstrating those top levels of quality and intentionality move on to the next stage.
In first place, progressing to round 2, the best of 25 years revisited by Alison Moyet.
In second place, also progressing, Unorthodox Jukebox by Bruno Mars.
In third place, and therefore eliminated from the quest, the Grease soundtrack by various artists.
And in fourth place, also eliminated despite its retrospective quality, High Times. Singles, 1992-2006 by Jamiroquai.
The outcome is clear-cut. Alison Moyet and Bruno Mars move one step closer to potentially being crowned the best album of all time in this personal quest. While the cultural icon Grease and the belatedly appreciated Jamiroquai collection have hit the end of the road, it was a really tough, diverse group. But his criteria, were pretty ruthlessly applied. #tag outro.
You know, what stands out most profoundly for me from this album quest analysis is how deeply the author's personal history dictates the final outcome. Like, the Jamiroquai analysis really highlights that. Being a metal-obsessed teenager meant that album started with this huge 2-decade deficit of appreciation. Our assessment of the best is just fundamentally linked to the journey we took to get there, isn't it?
That's the absolute core takeaway, I think. The criteria aren't fixed in stone floating in space, they're personal. The author's appreciation for Alison Moyet is validated because he literally sees his own ideal track list reflected in her curation. That's powerful.
Yeah.
And the consistency of her vocal performance over 25 years is clearly something he values and rewards highly. You just can't separate the objective musical analysis, is this well produced, is the singing good, from the subjective history of the listener. It requires real critical honesty to try and set aside past prejudices, which the author clearly did with Jamiroquai eventually. But even that honesty wasn't enough to displace the perceived focused quality of the winners in this specific ranking.